You don't need to say everything is fine. You don't need to pretend it never happened. You don't need to have a conversation, send a message, or even speak to the person who hurt you. Forgiveness requires none of those things. What most people believe about forgiveness is wrong, and that mistaken belief is exactly what keeps millions of adults carrying a weight that is destroying their health, their relationships, and their ability to be present in their own lives. Forgiveness is not a gift you give to the person who hurt you. It is a surgery you perform on yourself. It is the removal of a poison you have continued to ingest every single day since the moment the wound happened, while the other person moved on, slept well, and probably thinks about you with half the frequency you think about them. In this video, you are going to understand what resentment does to your body and your brain at the physiological level, what both science and ancient wisdom say about the act of forgiving, and how to release a weight you may have been carrying for years, not out of generosity, but out of survival. Let's start with what nobody tells you about resentment, what it actually is from a neurological standpoint. When you relive a wound, an episode of betrayal, humiliation, abandonment, or injustice, your brain does not distinguish between the original event and the memory of it. For the nervous system, remembering is reliving. Every time you replay the scene in your head, and research shows that people with chronic resentment do this dozens of times per day involuntarily, your body releases the same stress hormones it released when the event first occurred. Cortisol, adrenaline, inflammatory response. The person who hurt you wounded you once. Resentment wounds you repeatedly, in slow motion, indefinitely. A study from Hope College published in the Journal of Behavioral Medicine demonstrated that simply imagining a scenario of non-forgiveness significantly elevates blood pressure, heart rate, and skin conductance, direct indicators of stress system activation. And when that state becomes chronic, the physical consequences are documented and serious: greater cardiovascular risk, immune compromise, sleep disorders, and elevated levels of inflammatory markers associated with chronic disease. There is a metaphor that researcher Fred Luskin, director of the Stanford Forgiveness Project, uses consistently in his work that captures something no scientific data alone can fully convey. He says that carrying resentment is like setting yourself on fire and waiting for the other person to burn. You are suffering. The other person is living their life. And every day you feed the resentment, revisiting the wound, reinforcing the victimization narrative, keeping the flame of injustice alive. You are choosing, unconsciously but really, to keep suffering. This is not a judgment. It is physiology. And recognizing it is the first movement toward freedom. Luskin spent decades studying forgiveness in contexts ranging from everyday interpersonal conflicts to survivors of political violence in Northern Ireland, and the conclusion that runs through all of those contexts is the same: forgiveness measurably and significantly reduces the psychological suffering of the person who forgives, regardless of any response from the other party. But here is where we need to be honest about what forgiveness is not, because resistance to forgiveness almost always comes from a distorted understanding of what it requires. Forgiving is not saying that what happened was acceptable. It is not reconciliation. You can forgive someone and never have contact with that person again. It is not forgetting. The memory of the event does not disappear with forgiveness. It is not weakness. Research consistently shows that people with greater capacity for forgiveness have higher self-esteem, not lower. And it is not a single event that happens on one afternoon of insight. It is a process that can take weeks, months, or years depending on the depth of the wound. What forgiveness is, in its most precise and least romanticized definition, is a deliberate decision to release the psychological demand that the past should have been different. It is releasing the expectation of a repair that may never come. It is ending the emotional contract that keeps you bound to the person who hurt you long after any physical contact has ended. The spiritual dimension of forgiveness, and here we are speaking of spirituality in the broadest and most non-religious sense, Although every major religious tradition in the world places forgiveness at the center of its practice, points to something that science confirms but cannot fully explain. Every great tradition of human wisdom, from Buddhism to Christianity, from Islam to Stoicism, identified forgiveness as a practice of liberation of the self, not absolution of the other. The Buddhist concept of metta, unconditional loving kindness, specifically includes the practice of sending thoughts of well-being to people who have caused you suffering, not because they deserve it, but because hatred contaminates the mind of the one who carries it. Marcus Aurelius, writing in the Meditations 2,000 years ago, observed that the best revenge is not to become like the one who hurt you. That is not poetic wisdom, it is a practical instruction for the preservation of character and psychological health under adversity. And it is exactly what contemporary neuroscience is confirming with data that the ancients did not have access to but intuited with remarkable precision. The practical process of forgiveness, based on the integrated work of Fred Luskin, psychologist Everett Worthington, and contemplative traditions, begins with a movement that feels counterintuitive, fully validating the wound before any attempt to release it. Trying to forgive prematurely, before fully acknowledging the impact of what happened, is a form of emotional suppression that does not produce real forgiveness, it produces denial with a spiritual veneer. The first phase is naming what happened with precision and honesty, what was done, how it affected you, what you lost. Not to relive the suffering, but to give the wound a clear outline that can be consciously worked through. The second phase is what Worthington calls unconditional empathy, the difficult and voluntary practice of trying to understand, without justifying, the circumstances that shaped the person who hurt you. This does not reduce their responsibility. But it reduces your perception that the event was a statement about your personal worth, which is the interpretation that causes the most pain and sustains resentment the longest. The third phase is where the work becomes deeply personal and deeply liberating. It is the moment when you identify the benefit of forgiveness for you, not for the other person, with enough specificity to create real motivation. What will you recover when you release this weight? What energy is being consumed by the maintenance of resentment that could be directed toward what you love, toward who you are becoming? That question is not rhetorical. It is a tool. And the honest answer to it, written down, revisited, and kept as an anchor during the moments when resentment returns, because it will return, is what transforms forgiveness from an abstract intention into a concrete and sustainable practice. If you made it to the end of this video, you probably have someone in mind, a specific situation. A wound you have carried long enough to know exactly how heavy it is. And perhaps you have resisted forgiveness for years because someone told you that forgiving was weakness, or because it seemed unfair to release something the other person never acknowledged, or simply because nobody explained to you that forgiveness has nothing to do with the other person. It has everything to do with you. With your health. With your freedom. With the quality of your presence in your own life. Start today with a single question written on paper. What am I losing by continuing to carry this? The answer to that question is the beginning of the path. Share this video with someone you know is carrying an old weight. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for someone is show them there is a way out. Subscribe to continue this journey. See you there.